Segment 3, Gold and Black Live. Tyler Ochs joins us, and Tyler, we've had the opportunity to work with Tyler. He's an undergrad at Purdue at Gold and Black, and kind of overdue in having this conversation, only because it is such a big part of college sports today. And it is not to say a respite, but it's obviously it's the entertainment part of college sports and the gambling part that has become the way things are done. And you're in the demographic, because you're a young guy, that this is kind of something that people of your age group are very much used to and are utilizing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think people my age, it's so mainstream. We've seen kind of with the older generation, it always kind of had that taboo feel, and now with PASPA being overturned, the legalization of gambling, especially in Indiana, I think a majority of my demographic, kind of that younger, what you would call a millennial.
He's under 30.
Yeah,
under 30. There you go.
That millennial, but even above that a
yeah,
little bit.
Absolutely.
You see a lot of people really taking on that. The sports gambling that's now offered to them. Well,
it's funny because I think I don't know if it's DraftKings or which one, but they offered a little bit of money, and I've got a guy that's sitting next with that's in my demographic, which is twice of what Tyler is. That all of a sudden people are they're having fun with that part of it. It's a smaller bets, but you can bet prop bets and all that. That's a big part of what we're already seeing. People in Mackey Arena placing bets during the course of games.
And they make it so easy. They put it on your phone now. I remember the IU Purdue game at home. Purdue is an 7 point favorite, and people are sweating it out. Most fans there are really excited. They're really happy about the game. But you have the few of us out there that had Purdue, and we're kind of sitting there real nervous, hoping can Eric Hunter hit free throws down the stretch and that sort of thing. So
and did they cover? Yes,
they covered. They covered both times against IU. So very big.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting phenomenon in terms of that. Now, you've written stuff on our site and on our message boards, but talk about when people, there's a real science to this if you want to do it well, and you certainly take a very analytical approach to it. What are some of the things that people aren't aware of? That we all see the line and we see certain things, but what drives the line? I thought it was very interesting in terms of what it's not just it is Vegas setting the line, but it's almost the marketplace that drives it from that point forward.
Yeah, and I think that's what is kind of confusing to people who are new getting into it is. The line is not a prediction of what the score is going to be. The line is where Vegas wants people to bet.
Yeah.
So Vegas will set, that 2.5, that 3.5, if they want people to bet a certain direction because they're trying to generate money on one side.
Yeah.
So a lot of what I talk about in that column is doing kind of a public perception and going based off the public. If there's always that age-old saying that Vegas always wins.
Yeah.
And so you kind of look at, I want to be on the right side of Vegas. And so going on a contrarian standpoint, when you have the public all taking one side or loving one side, the natural thing to do is I want to be on Vegas' side, so you hop on the other. And I know for football we had a lot of success this year. Purdue, I think, as a whole was 9-3 against the spread over the 12-game season. So.
Which is interesting with a 4-8 record that was the case. But explain how that line moves, because even for those of us that pay attention to it but don't really understand how the date or how the math works, because it changes because of money being put on a particular team.
And so Vegas ultimately is going to limit their liability. They have their algorithms, where they're going to generate a line, and people bet it. And if everybody's coming in on one side at a certain point, there's so much money that I'm sure Vegas gets a little bit nervous. And so they're going to move that spread. They might bump that number in favor because they are a little bit nervous. What's really interesting, and I remember when I was younger and somewhat naive listening to Stu Feiner talk about this, but you'll see on occasion things called reverse line movement, which is where all the money might be coming in on one team, but the line will still move in favor of the other. So an example of that would be, let's say Purdue is +2 tomorrow against Ohio State, and
meaning they're a 2-point underdog.
Correct.
Right.
They're 2-point underdog, and all the money is coming in on Ohio State, but the spread would move to Purdue, +1, or even Purdue even. That doesn't make sense. The logical
that's a reverse. That's the definition.
And that's
of
the reverse.
Line.
The logical thing would be the spread moves to 2.5 or 3 because all the money is coming in, and Vegas wants to limit liability.
Yeah.
And the reverse is kind of a rare occurrence, but when it happens, it's normally a very good sign. If you're the team that they're moving the line
Yeah.
towards, because Vegas is confident enough that they can move that line your way, and people are still going to keep betting more so because clearly they like the line where it was. Here's an extra point, and we're still going to move it.
Yeah. In football this year, give me examples. Were there any examples of where the line changed dramatically on people putting money on because Purdue said covered the spread 8 out of 12 times, you thought, or 9 out of 12 times?
9 out of 12,
But
yeah.
examples of games this year where that happened, were there any where the money came in a lot more on Purdue or a lot more on an opponent that you recall?
Well, I think what you'll look at, especially with my columns, is
Yeah.
more often than not, and I was shocked how much this happened, was the money was coming in on other teams.
Yeah.
The one example you saw money coming in heavy on Purdue was the Nevada game.
Yeah.
And I recommended taking Nevada in that game for that reason. Penn State's a great example where I think Penn State might have been the most public bet team that day, and the spread was at 28.5.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that was, I mean, the most I've sweat.
Yeah.
You watch that game
Yeah.
2 minutes in, you're like, well, this game's over. You thought Purdue was going to get beat by 100.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good example.
And the final on that one was 35-7?
Yeah, so if 28.5, they
Yeah.
covered by that
Yeah.
hook, and the hook is that half point.
Yeah.
So basketball, it's been really kind of prevalent. We saw it with Virginia, we saw it with Michigan State, we saw it with Iowa. All three of those, where those teams were very, very heavily bet, took on a significant, over 70% of money. And Purdue obviously
Destroyed
won
those
by
lines.
20,
Yeah.
so incredible.
The Virginia game was, the spread was I mean 4.5. I don't even remember what
Yeah,
it was.
it was small.
But it is always interesting in how that plays out. Where do you see all this? I mean, now that it is we're so accessible, so easy for fans to use. What's the next step? I mean, do you see? I mean, it's in college sports, and obviously it's not legal in every state
Right.
yet. In terms of that, what do you see? What do you think is next with all this?
It's tough to say right now. I think it's very interesting to watch because I think by the end of 2020, you're going to have well over a majority of states that have legalized it. I know Illinois and Michigan both are expected. I think Illinois has already taken their first legal
Yeah.
bet. Michigan's supposed to be in the next week. So the Midwest, especially outside of really Wisconsin, is really kind of blossoming and opening up sports gambling. I think prediction-wise, what you're going to see is a more interactive fan experience in stadiums themselves. The NFL has recently talked about opening up a gambling lounge. Well, they'll have lines, and you'll be able to look at and watch games in these lounges, but they will not be able to take bets. I think you'll start seeing more of that because as sports gambling grows, I think if you and a bunch of buddies, you're not going to go to a game. You're going to want to go to a sports bar where you can watch 8 or 9 different
Yeah.
games at one time and place those bets. And so stadiums, to kind of keep fans attending, you might have to start pushing that kind of in-game experience. So.
Yeah, so much of this too in Europe is kind of the way it's done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's completely everything is on the table, and this has just made its way over here. I mean, is that people are betting soccer or European football is a big part of this that continues that trend, and yet all it appears and. A lot of the returns on this is it's been immensely popular. I mean, it's hit that. All right, now when you talk about, and I know football is your place of expertise, but everybody talks about the NCAA tournament and the brackets strategies, at least that you use in terms of that, and in terms of how to fill out a bracket or things that make it different from a perspective of looking at. And this is a crazy year because it's so flatlined
Right.
in terms of teams not knowing. There seems to be a huge difference between the top and the bottom. How do you approach your bracket?
I mean, I'm not going to hold myself
Yeah.
as being fantastic
Yeah.
at the brackets. I normally try to focus in on the games themselves
Yeah.
and end up probably making more that way than
Yeah.
going through the actual brackets
Yeah.
themselves. But I think the mistakes I've made in the past with brackets is kind of what everybody does. You get a little upset heavy.
Yeah.
It's normally pretty chalk based, but I think what I've seen successful and other handicappers do is they normally try to find where the value lies. The public normally is pretty indicative on which favorite they like. You look at Duke last year.
Yeah.
Duke was by far and away the most picked team. Well, if I'm approaching a bracket challenge with somebody or just in general, I'm not putting Duke on there because everybody's putting
Yeah.
Duke on there. So, I was lucky enough to have Virginia last year, and that obviously ended up bittersweet because of that Purdue game.
Yeah, the Purdue.
So,
Purdue.
but that's just kind of the way I'll approach it this year. Is I'm going to try to see, where's the public, who do they really like. Generally, the public's also really big on which one seed is super weak because they're going to be out first,
Yeah.
and a lot more times often than not, that's not the case,
Yeah.
and that one seed will end up doing better than people expect. So it's just trying to find those little bits and going against the grain.
And then obviously with football, and will be the first year that you really have had the ability to have a lot of the, because I don't know when did it actually start? It was started in December 1st
For football?
No, all the online betting.
September 1st in
so
Indiana.
so they had it all in football
Yes.
this year. Some of the examples of the prop bets that are out there that you make during the course of the game? What are some of the favorites and one of the ones that people should look at from that standpoint?
Yeah, I think the Super Bowl was a great example of it. It's an absolute blast to bet the props for Super Bowl. You can do everything, coin toss and how long the national anthem goes. But on a more regular, you can bet everything from what's the result of this drive, who's going to score a touchdown at the end. If
And
a
you can do it in real
touchdown
time,
right?
obviously.
And you
You
can
have
do
to
this
do it in
real
real
time. Who's going to score a touchdown? Going into the game, you could look at props of players. Are they going to have more or less receiving yards than X number? So we could go into Purdue IU game, and Vegas might say we're going to set David Bell's receiving yards at 89.5 yards,
Yeah.
and you can bet over and under. Now props are, I think, a little bit less bet in college level.
Yeah.
You see that a lot more in professional. And I talked to a member from the NFL last week, kind of asking him some questions, and it was very interesting to hear how they're able to monitor prop bets for players to make sure that there's no kind of collusion or
Yeah.
lack of integrity going on, so they can kind of look for variations and deviances and see if something's going on. So I found that all fascinating.
Which I think is an interesting thing, especially in college, because there have been long before you were born. Well, not all of them have been long before you were born, but scandals and being able to deal with those, and from a
Right.
legal standpoint too. The CCNY to Boston College to Northwestern in basketball. How do you keep this regulated so that it stays above, especially in the college sports where there's money exchanged?
Yeah, I think books do a really good job on their own of kind of self-compliance, and they're monitoring, and they can tell if there's a weird amount of money bet on something obscure. Because I would joke with my friends, a lot of times during the NFL season, Jameis Winston interceptions was 0.5. It's like, well, he threw 30 of them last year.
Yeah.
How hard would it be for Jameis Winston to tell a buddy to go bet this? And so I think the books just do a really good job of self-policing. And if there's an abnormally high bet on one of these props that you go, something's up there. It's kind of like counting cards in a casino where casino pit bosses are always watching. It's the same thing. So it definitely is going to present a challenge, especially in the college level where, NFL players make enough money where if I offer you $100,000 as an NFL player, it's not going to
impact
sway.
your,
But if you go to a college athlete, and I think that's why Purdue took such an early stance on we're going to make it outright that students are not able to gamble, because we want to create an environment and foster that environment where we don't have to worry about the integrity of the game, where our students can go in Ford Dining Hall and don't have to worry about being pestered because somebody missed a free throw or somebody dropped the ball. And so I thought Purdue did a really good job getting ahead of that. And just being smart.
Yeah, and a necessity certainly. I think as this moves forward into the brave new world of college sports, that I'll admit I never thought I'd see this day, but it is the way that the day is, and that's it. Well, Tyler, thanks so much, and we'll look forward to your work on our site, also in the message boards and Knucklehead Central Premium subscribers get opportunity to read how Tyler's evaluating Purdue footballs as we look forward to each game. A little bit easier to do football too, because you got one game a week as opposed to
basketball. That they
set that
released the
line.
line so close to the game
Which
time.
is it the night before typically?
Normally Purdue, Ohio State's already out. It's Purdue +2.
Yeah.
And you're seeing public money come in heavy on Ohio State early.
Yeah.
So public money also came in on Rutgers early. So it'll just be interesting to watch how it flattens out. When it got closer to game time, sharp money started coming in on Rutgers a little bit.
Yeah.
And we saw how that resulted. So it'll be interesting to watch that. But right now, Purdue +2 seems like the contrarian pick. So fingers crossed it stays that way.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. All right, well, I want to thank Tyler. I want to thank also Brian Newbert and Tom Dienhart for segment 2. Some interesting stuff on all that's going on in the world of Purdue sports and Purdue University, and of course Joe Barry Carroll and his book Coach Lee Rose, the memoir, as well. Really enjoyed that conversation. We will be back scheduled next Golden Black Live. Actually, it's going to be with Mitch Daniels, and don't know how everything's going to play out with what's ahead with the university, but that will be, I believe we're going to do a Thursday edition for that. We'll keep you posted, and that will be, I think, on March the 27th. So we'll look forward to them. Our shows are starting to wind down in our 10th year, just a couple of those left. So have a great week, everybody. I want to thank our sponsors, and of course, Hilton Garden Inn, Trent Johnson, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, I should say, and Triple X on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. I want to thank Steve Clark and Scott Sumner and of course Gordon Jackson, Kurt Larman for making this happen again. We're grateful for your work and being able to get this in before the Big Ten tournament as well. Helped us have a more relevant show. So we'll look forward to doing that in a couple of weeks on Golden Black Live. Until then, be well, which is there's a premium on that these days, and we'll look forward to seeing you next on Golden Black Live.